Hello, this is Paul DeWitt with the Nashville Bar Association Historical Committee. As part of the ongoing oral history project, I'm very proud today to be interviewing Jack Butler, prominent Nashville attorney, about his career and life. And today is Monday, March 28th, 2011. And Jack, thank you so much for being here and for agreeing to talk a little bit today about your life and career in Nashville. And first question I'd like to just ask you is your full name and date of birth.
Full name Jack A. Butler, date of birth is 10/26/37.
And I believe you were born in Nashville?
Correct. St. Thomas Hospital.
All right. Which at that time was not where it is now.
That's correct.
Where was it?
It was
then?
on Hayes Street.
All right. And you grew up in the Green Hills area of Nashville, I believe?
Green Hills, actually off of Woodmont Boulevard, yes.
All right. And your father, of course, was an attorney, and very prominent attorney in Nashville for years, and he practiced both criminal and civil law. Is that correct? Growing up, did you keep close track of his doings? Did he talk much about his career or his cases and so forth?
Yeah, actually, when he was in the district attorney's office, he was first assistant, same job that Tom Thurman has now with Torrey Johnson. And there were quite a few write-ups because he tried the major cases, as Tom does. And there was a lot of publicity in the paper about him. And when I was in law school, I would actually go to the courts and listen to his trials.
So his name was Howard Butler, of course.
Right.
Known to many as General Butler.
Correct.
And a terrific lawyer, and obviously a tremendous influence on you and your decision, I guess, to go into law yourself.
Absolutely.
All right. Did he serve in World War II?
He did.
And did his career there affect your life to some extent as well?
Well, we moved around quite a bit. He was in the Air Force, and we moved, I remember, various places. I had started here in Nashville at Palmer School in the first grade, and by the time we got back after the war was over in 1945, I was changed to Woodmont Grammar School. They don't call it grammar school anymore. I think they call it grade school, but at any rate, in the fourth grade.
That would have been 1945 or 6, around
1945.
All right. And I guess you were living over off Woodmont Boulevard, right. And you finished Woodmont and went where to school after that?
Went to MBA after that.
Montgomery Bell Academy,
right.
Which then is located out on Harding Road.
Right, and it was then.
Prominent all-boys prep school. And you graduated from MBA what year, Jack?
1955.
And went from there to
Vanderbilt University.
All right. Before we get into your further academic career, I believe at a very early age you got your pilot's license to fly planes.
I did. I got my license at age 16.
And how'd you get interested in flying, and what opportunities did you have?
Well, I guess because my dad was a pilot, I became very interested in flying and went ahead and got my license at an early age, and flew for 25 or 30 years after that.
To get your pilot's license, what did you have to log a certain number of hours in the air, or how did you do?
Paul, as I remember, you had to have 40 hours, most of which was with an instructor, and then you had to do your solo flight, and you had to try to make 3 cross-country flights, as I recall, and in fact I remember it vividly. I had to go to Chattanooga, Knoxville, and back to Nashville in order to complete my private pilot's license.
And you were how old?
Well, I was 16 when I got my license, so sometime in my 16th year.
Well, I would imagine that there are very few, if any, persons who got a pilot's license at an age that young. You probably got your pilot's license before you got your driver's license, or about the same time.
It was the same year.
Same time?
Yeah, it
Wow.
was the same year, and you're correct. There were not many of us that got our license, our pilot's license, at age 16. At age 16, I also joined the Air National Guard. I had to have my parents' permission and signature to do that, but so a lot happened my 16th year.
Wow. So you were a pilot and in the Air Guard in 54, thereabouts.
I joined in 54, served 20 years, and retired at 1974.
Now, in the Air Guard, you were obligated to train, I believe, 2 weeks out of the year and perform whatever other duties you were called on.
Correct. I had several different positions in the Air National Guard. I was Director of Security, Director of Intelligence, Director of Firing Range, and Director of Riot Control Training.
Wow, and I suppose a lot of that involved very high-level security or top clearance, top secret clearance.
I had a top secret clearance with the Air Force, yes.
Now, did you fly your own plane? Did you have your own plane?
Well, I started out, Paul, renting. That we didn't have any money back then, so you rented. But as time went by, we ended up with our own airplane.
I see. And so, apart from your work duties with the Guard, did you fly for professional or personal reasons? Or?
Well, it was professional, yes. If sometimes we had a case out of town, I would fly there. We also owned a condominium jointly with someone else, and we would fly down to Destin. Later on, we got a contract with Ford Motor Company, flying parts to Miami, and I took most of those weekend flights on Saturday and came back that evening.
Do you still fly?
No, I couldn't. I had an instrument rating, and you've got to really stay current on that. And I felt like I'd reached an age where I couldn't stay current anymore, so to be safe, I just quit.
Do any of your children or grandchildren share your interests?
Not at this time. not now.
And I believe you were married at a pretty young age and
Married at
stayed
19. Married at 19, been married 54 years.
And your wife's name is?
Martha.
And y'all have been blessed with, I believe,
3 children.
3 children.
7 grandchildren.
Isn't that terrific?
Yeah.
But none of them are flyers.
No, I couldn't even get any of them interested in law school. My oldest daughter said she wanted to go to law school, so when it came time, I asked her if she was still going, and she said no, and I said, why? And she said, because I don't want to look like you do when you get home at night. So that ended her desire to go to law school.
Well, you're very blessed to have a wife and family like you do, and in 1959, I believe you graduated from Vanderbilt with a degree in history, a bachelor's degree.
Right.
All right. Now, did you have a desire all along to practice law? Is that pretty much the career path you
I did.
wanted?
Because my father had been a lawyer, I wanted to do the same thing.
And where did you attend law school?
I attended law school at the Nashville School of Law.
And when did you begin there?
I would have been, actually, what I did, my last year of Vanderbilt, was my first year in law school because Vanderbilt was during the day and Nashville School of Law was at night. So I went to Vanderbilt all day and the Nashville School of Law at night.
Oh my gosh! So you were enrolled in two different university, or one university and one law school at the same time, and
Right.
attending classes during the day and law school at night.
Right,
Wow.
and also worked 40 hours a week.
Is that right? Where were you working?
Security at the Air National Guard. As a matter of fact, that's where I met Randall White, one of our local judges.
Yes.
He was working for the, at that time, Nashville Police Department. We hadn't become metropolitan government at that time. And he took care of the airport and that sort of thing, and I took care of security at the Air National Guard. So we've known each other a long time, probably ate the evening meal every night together.
Is that right? And he's a terrific man and judge.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is.
The Air National Guard was based then at Berry Field,
Right.
which is the predecessor of our current airport.
Right.
Right. And so was it the place where you worked right next to the airport at the time?
Right, it was at the airport.
Oh, at the airport.
It was at the
I
airport.
I see. And so you were working 40 hours a week doing security at the Guard and attending Vanderbilt and attending law school.
Right.
I don't know how you could do it.
I slept 3 nights a week.
Oh my gosh. And I guess beginning a family as well.
Already had 2 children.
Oh my gosh. You completed law school and took the bar exam in around what,
1962.
And upon passing the bar then, you went into practice.
I did.
What lawyers were you associated with?
My father, Howard Butler, Joe Binkley, Bill McHugh, John Toon.
Uh-huh.
John and I had been in law school together.
John Toon. And did you focus, at least at first, mostly on criminal defense and personal injury?
That's about, yes. Well, when you start off, Paul, you handle about anything that comes in the door, and you slowly eliminate those areas that you don't particularly care for. And I pretty well stayed with criminal defense and personal injury throughout my career.
And the group of lawyers you started off with, I can imagine no better group to learn from and getting to know, I'm sure, all the judges and other lawyers around town and the clerks and court officers and so forth. Was it a smaller community back then when you started, the legal community?
When I started, Paul, there were 300 lawyers in Nashville.
Uh-huh.
And about 100 went to court. The other 200 didn't. Now, I thought around 2,200, but somebody told me the other day it was closer to 4. I'm still not sure. I don't believe it's that big, but that's what I was told.
I've heard around 3,000 lawyers in Nashville.
That's probably
So
more.
there's at least probably 10 times as many lawyers in Nashville now as there were when you started in 1962. Where were your offices?
We were in the old Nashville Trust Building, which is directly across from Regions Bank on Union Street at the time.
And what floor were you on?
14.
And wasn't that the top floor of that
floor.
building? At that time, were there a lot of other attorneys in that building?
A lot of attorneys were in that building, yes. Both that building and the building next door, the American Trust Building.
And you would frequently, obviously, rub shoulders with these lawyers there and in court and around town and so forth.
Right.
I believe very early on you were involved in a trial in criminal court involving some people charged with absentee ballot fraud on one of the congressional elections. Tell us about that case and your role in it a little bit.
Okay. There had At that time, Carlton Loser, who was the district attorney, ran for Congress. And unbeknownst to him, Gene Jacobs, who was a bondsman, was going around trying to help him, I think unsolicited, and going to see people and giving them a pint of whiskey to go vote absenteeism for General Losa, which of course he knew nothing about.
I see.
And there were 6 defendants. My lady, and I can't remember her name, she got 3 days. And it lasted quite a while. It was in Judge Leather's court, and
Judge Raymond Leathers.
Judge Raymond Leathers,
right. How many criminal court judges were there then?
There were only 2 at that time, Judge Leathers and Judge Draper.
Judge John Draper.
Right.
They were both located on the 6th floor
Right.
of what we now call the historic courthouse.
Right.
Then it was just known as the courthouse, I guess.
Right.
And do you remember who any of the circuit judges or chancellors were at the time?
At the time I started, the circuit judges were, I believe, Judge Bird Douglas, Judge Henry Todd, and we're going back too far
Okay.
from me to
All right.
remember.
But
Judge
Olien
Roy
or-
Miles,
yeah.
I believe, was circuit judge.
Judge Olien, maybe, and
Judge Olien was later on. He was much later on. He had, gosh, I can't remember who. Someone got sick, and I can't remember who it was, and he finished out their term, and then, as I recall, was reelected.
you, I guess, right after passing the bar, were representing people from all walks of life. And tell us a little bit about what experiences you had as a young lawyer, or some of the funny or interesting clients you had or cases you had.
Well, in the Second Ward vote fraud case that we just mentioned, I was cross-examining one of the persons who had sold their vote for a pint of whiskey. And I remember asking him, you mean to tell us you sold your vote for a pint of whiskey? He said, no, sir, it was a half pint. Of course, the jury laughed, and it was rather comical. There was an older fellow here in Nashville, a nice gentleman by the name of Monty Ross. Monty was kind of the brunt of a lot of jokes. Everybody loved him, but he fell for them. I mean, he fell for the jokes that we played. He came to criminal court one day, which was unusual. I don't think he'd ever been in criminal court before. And when his case was called, Judge Leathers said, that'll be the case tried today. Of course, he wasn't prepared. He didn't know it was going to be tried. I don't know why he didn't. And he turned around and asked several of us, what do we do? What should I do? And we told him to take a non-suit, which of course you can't do in a criminal case, only in a civil case. So he told the judge he's going to take a non-suit. He said, Judge Leathers said, you can't take a non-suit in here, Mr. Ross. You're ready to go to trial. And I don't recall whether he did or didn't on that particular day.
Well, there were a lot of occasions now as then where if you see an inexperienced lawyer in criminal court, there's a tremendous temptation to play some kind of practical joke on him if he says he needs advice. So
there it is, and we've done that.
Yeah.
Of course, my age group, after I'd been practicing a little longer, we like to help younger lawyers and be available if they had a question or wanted to confer with you about something.
Well, it's a terrific occupation, and if the older attorney can serve as a mentor to a younger one, it's a very helpful. I know there may be some lawyers who think just let him fly by the seat of his pants and learn the hard way, and I guess there's something to that too. But
Well,
who were
though,
some of the attorneys that you looked up to in your early days?
In my early days, probably Jack Norman Sr., John J. Hooker, Cecil Brandstatter, to name some.
Okay. Those were some of the prominent trial lawyers in Nashville at that time.
They were.
And as far as the trials themselves, I guess a lot more civil trials went to before juries then than now. Is that right?
Yeah.
The circuit courts were probably a lot busier then.
Much busier. In fact, on the day your case was tried, you would go up and wait around the 5th floor until the court came open. Sometimes you would wait an hour or two. Sometimes you might wait all day long. I recall Mr. Norman going into a court one day, and he said, "How far are y'all apart on disposing of this case?" And they said $500. Of course, $500 back then was probably, I don't know, $1,000, $2,000, whatever it is. And so he took $500 out of his pocket and said, "Case settled. This is my court now." So he moved into that court.
That was his way of getting to the head of the line.
That's right. That's right.
Everybody came out satisfied, I guess.
Yeah. Now you go over there on any given day and it's deserted. And what has caused that, I think, is mediation, where you go before an attorney or retired judge and try to settle your case that way.
And I guess the tendency to mediation is caused by probably higher litigation expenses than
Well,
used to
that's
be.
exactly right. These doctors, when I first started practicing law, would charge $300 for a deposition. They are now, some of them, up to $1,500, $1,700 that your client has to come up with to get a deposition of the doctors. You know, doctors are not required to come to court. They're exempt. So the only way you get your medical proof is to go out and take their deposition. And for that, they're charging $1,500, $1,700. If you mediate it, you do not have to have that deposition. You can just produce your medical records.
So there's a financial incentive to mediate.
Oh, absolutely.
And that in
Yeah.
turn leads to more mediation and fewer cases being
Right.
tried. Right. What other changes have you seen in the practice of law, or any particular topics or particular areas of practice over the years you've been practicing, Jack?
Back in those days, when you arraigned someone in criminal court, Judge Draper and Judge Leathers would set the case off 6 months for trial. And then if you settled it and you had 6 months to try to settle it, you would go over any morning at 8:30 and announce to the court that you settled it and dispose of it that way by entering a plea, and that was the end of it. As opposed to now, where you have to go over 5 or 6 or 7 times for discussion dates.
They didn't have even a discussion docket or settlement docket. You went straight from arraignment to a trial date back in the old days.
Straight from arraignment to trial date, but you continued to talk to the district attorneys about settling your case, if it could be settled.
And I guess when you started out as an attorney doing criminal defense work, Harry Nickel was the district attorney.
No, when I started,
Carlton Loser.
When I started, Carlton Loser was the district attorney.
And your father was, along with a few other attorneys, prosecuted all the felony cases.
Right.
And the district attorney became Tom Shriver, I believe, in 1966. And how did he or his staff differ from those that your father worked for?
I was thinking Tom Shriver, who was the district attorney then, started a little later than that.
I believe he was
Paul,
elected in '66.
Was he elected in
Yeah.
'66? And we thought because he'd been district attorney, he was going to be hard on the defendants. But it turned out Tom Shriver was one of the fairest judges that we'd had in a long time.
Because he became a judge, I believe, in 1987.
Right.
And Division I.
He did.
And served very well for about 10 years before his untimely death.
Right.
Did you have occasion to try many cases in criminal court?
Yeah,
too?
back then we tried a lot of cases in criminal court and civil court. Of course, criminal court still tries a lot of cases. Circuit courts don't try many cases anymore. But there's always been several trials going on daily within the criminal court system.
Always plenty of crime going on. And, more cases than there are courtrooms to try them in. So.
Yeah, and especially in the last 2 years where the economy is so bad, people tend to get into trouble more because they don't have a job and they have children at home to feed, and therefore they get into more trouble.
So you were originally with your father and John Toon and Joe Binkley and the other attorneys you were with. Did you continue with some of those attorneys all well on into the 70s and 80s, or?
Yeah, we moved when the First American Center was built. We were the first tenant in the First American Center.
Is that right?
Yeah, in fact, we went there before the bank moved in.
Is that right?
And
that would have been sometime in the 70s, I think.
73 or 4, somewhere along in there. And I stayed in that building for 35 years.
Wow.
Practicing, yes, and John Toon and I and my dad and Irvin Entrikin and a fellow named John Nelly and Charles Leach were all over there and started that firm that was known as Butler, Entrikin, and Toon, or Butler, Toon, and Entrikin.
And y'all were on the top floor?
No, we were on the 26th floor.
26th floor.
I think Bass, Berry, and Sims was on the top floor.
All right, so you were with that group for quite a few years, and
yeah, several years, and then I moved into another group, Larry Snedeker, Joe Lackey Jr., and Maynard Holt, and we practiced together for several years.
In the First American Center.
Right.
And what other lawyers have you worked with over the years?
Oh gosh, I'm trying to think. We moved down at some point to the first floor of the First American building and practiced with Todd Faulkner, Jeff Cole, Kimberly Haas, who was an assistant DA, 2 or 3 others. Bill Leach, who was the nephew of the state attorney general. And that's all I can remember right now.
But you have pretty much continued to focus on personal injury and criminal defense.
Correct.
Did you ever do any workers' comp work?
Still do some workers' comp.
Yeah.
The legislature kind of made that, when they passed some laws several years ago, not as lucrative by changing what's called the multiplier. If it's permanent impairment, and then they changed from 2.5 to 1.5 times, and you wouldn't think that would make that much difference, but it does, and it did. And I don't do as much workers' compensation as I did years ago.
And you now practice here in the Washington Square building.
I do.
And how long have you been here?
5 years.
And what kind of, you still do mostly personal injury and criminal defense?
I do.
And tell us a little bit, like I imagine when you started practicing law, just in terms of the daily routine around the office, there weren't any computers then or fax machines. What kind of technology did you have?
Our first typewriter was the Royal typewriter, where the carriage went over and rang a bell, and when it rang a bell, you reached up and pulled it back over. And that was back when your copies were made with the, I want to say onion skin or
Carbon paper.
Carbon paper, right.
No Xerox machine.
No Xerox machine was even heard of at that time. And then we went from the Royal typewriter to the electric typewriter, and we thought we had arrived when we went to the electric typewriter. And then we went to a typewriter called word processor, and there was a little screen on top of the typewriter that showed you the last 10 or 12 words that you had put in there. And then from there we went to another type of word processor that looked like it had a great big fan on the back of it, and I never did figure out what that was for. And then later on, computers.
So you've seen a lot of progress made in just office technology and over the years.
I have. I still don't know how to use a computer. But
you don't use computers?
I don't need to, as long as my staff can use them, yeah.
Well, it's a whole different era now. No lawyer, I imagine there are no lawyers that come into practice now that don't have at least some basic computer skills,
Right.
for better or worse.
Right.
The Bar Association itself, of course, I guess, when you started out, was pretty much all male and virtually all white, and now it's very much more diverse, and that's been a good thing, I'm sure. Have you observed that over the years?
Yeah, when I started practicing, Paul, there were two females practicing law. Mm-hmm. Mildred Lunn and Miss Becky Thomas. Mm-hmm. They were the only two females practicing at that time. And now it's probably close to 50% mm-hmm. females and males. But there were, as I say, two when we started.
Now, and probably most of the vast majority of lawyers in Nashville either went to Vanderbilt or Nashville School of Law.
I think that's correct, yeah.
Did you practice much out of Nashville, like in surrounding counties?
I went to all of the surrounding counties, the counties that touch Davidson County for years, but I decided last year I wasn't going to do that anymore. It just takes up your whole day, and it got to be a chore, so I quit doing it, although I did it for years. Mm-hmm.
You have any memories or funny stories from any of the courts in other counties or places around Tennessee?
No, not that I can recall. We had some judges that were, well, I actually believe that they didn't like Nashville lawyers. They felt like people were coming into their territory. But by the same token, we had some very good judges in the surrounding counties. Mm-hmm. It just got to be too much to try to do and take care of your business here in Nashville. Mm-hmm.
And I believe you now have a grandson who's a budding lawyer. Is that right?
I do. I have my oldest daughter's son is in his first year of law school at the Nashville School of Law, and he works for me.
And his name is?
John Ballard.
And John is working for you now while attending law school.
He is.
And you have been fortunate enough to receive some awards and commendations over the years. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Well, I hate to blow, but I've been listed in Best Lawyers of America since its inception some 30 years ago. I'm AV rated. I've been listed as Best Lawyers in Nashville. Preeminent attorney, of which there's only 5% in the United States. AV rating from Martindale-Hubbell, which is the highest rating you can get. one of the best 100 trial lawyers in the Southeast, and a few more.
Well, quite a nice record you've made.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you wish I'd asked and you would like to tell us?
Paul, I can't think of anything. There's been such a tremendous change since the day I started, and now we go in the courtroom now and don't even know the lawyers that are on the other side. I can remember when Fridays, which is motion day, in the civil courts, it was kind of a social day for the attorneys. You got to see people you hadn't seen all week or maybe a month. There'd be 15, 20, 35 cases to be heard on Fridays. Now there might be 10 lawyers in each court, which would be a lot. And nobody out in the hall, you know, the whole... It's not as much fun now as it was back then.
Not as collegial?
No. We had back then, we had fun. We had the bar picnic where we went down on houseboats. We had golf tournaments. We had a lot more getting together with each other, probably sometimes at the Gerst House.
The bar picnic, wasn't it held out at a farm?
Hobbs Farm.
Hobbs Farm.
Hobbs
Do you remember
Farm.
going out there?
Many times. And again, that was a time to see attorneys that you hadn't seen, that didn't come to the courts, you know, and everybody would go to that, and we really enjoyed that, and that was one thing we just don't see much of anymore.
Do you intend to retire, and if so, what do you intend to do in retirement?
Well, I don't, Paul, right
Not
now,
encouraging you to do so.
I don't have any plans to retire. My dad practiced till he was 80, and had open heart surgery then, and wasn't able to come back to work. But frankly, I have no intentions of retiring. I enjoy what I'm doing, and I'll probably just stay on till I can't anymore.
Have any hobbies or sports that you...
No, I used to. I used to fly, as we mentioned, and I used to play golf, tennis, duck hunting, goose hunting. But I've done all those things, you know, and I'm not going to do what some lawyers do, stay home and watch the soap operas. That just doesn't appeal to me at all. So.
Dull your mind pretty quickly watching that all day,
right.
Watching Oprah.
Yeah, which I'm not going to do.
Yeah. Any particular accomplishment that gave you the most satisfaction, or?
Probably the last one I got, I was named super lawyer. I think is a very high honor, at least I believe it is. I was very pleased with that.
Well, very good, and thank you for letting me interview you today and for your participation, and carry on.
Paul, I appreciate you having me here, and I understand someday, 50 years from now, someone may be looking at this and others that have been interviewed to see what we did back now as compared to what they do 50 years from now.
Well, you never know when some little detail might be of tremendous interest to a historian or lawyer somewhere down the road. So.
I will say one thing, if I might add one more thing. When I started practicing, the legislature met every 3 years.
Oh.
And then they started meeting every 2 years. And now, as you know, they meet every year. And what that has done has made it very hard to keep up with the law, because you're going back to what we did when it was 3 times, or every 3 years, and every 2 years. All those laws have either been abolished or changed. But the legislature passes so many laws in both the civil and criminal field now, meeting every year, it's just difficult to keep up with the law, and you got to stay on top of it.
have to get continuing legal education every year,
You got to do 13 hours every year. But even with that, it's still difficult to keep up with the law.
Well, you've done a terrific job for many years, Jack, and are a credit to our Bar Association and our profession. So thank you so much.
Paul, I appreciate that. Thank you for having me.
Okay.